Greetings and welcome to this edition of
Positronic Hypersonic.
Positronic Hypersonic.
Positronic Hypersonic.
I'm Barry P. Cook, and I'm here to talk to you about the most recent episode of It. Welcome to Derry, the second to last episode of its premiere season. It was called The Black Spot. And as the episode starts, it's 1908, and we find ourselves at the Derry Carnival, where we're introduced to the human version of Pennywise the Dancing Clown, aka Bob Gray. After his show, performed with the help of his young daughter Ingrid, a mysterious child watches all the goings-on around the stage from a distance. Backstage, Pennywise's makeup is gone, showing a balding, middle-aged man, again, Bob Gray, and Ingrid, now dressed up like a clown herself, and they talk about the past under the big top before they ended up in the carnival, and Ingrid's deceased mom, whom Bob then names Ingrid's clown character, Periwinkle, after. Night falls, and a half-made-up Bob is having a smoke and a drink at the back of the fairgrounds. And in the darkness, something moves. Bob calls out, and the boy from earlier steps out from the shadows and mentions how he's noticed that the children are drawn to Pennywise. But he doesn't even crack a smile. He tells Bob that he can't find his parents before we hear a scream in the woods. At which point, the boy calmly says that it's his mother, leading to Bob Gray taking his hand and going into the dark woods with him. Later, Ingrid is looking for her father when another performer finds her father's handkerchief covered in blood. Then we're back to 1962 at the Black Spot, where the masked mob has arrived looking for Hank Grogan. They walk into the club, guns drawn, and Chief Bowers, who's in front, explains that they're there for Hank, at which point Hank turns himself in as Ronnie protests. But of course, all the soldiers there, and some of their friends, also have guns. So after a standoff, the mob retreats outside, claiming that they're going to stand down, but of course they don't. They chain the doors of the building and throw Molotov cocktails through the windows before starting to shoot through the walls. Of course, panic ensues, everyone's running for their lives, and of course, some are killed right away as the Black Spot burns. Dig Halloran makes his way through it, seeing what would appear to be a bunch of ghosts, including a soldier from what would seem to be the Civil War with his jaw removed right off of his head. He ends up moving a fridge and smashes through the floor beneath, which was a little weakened from the leaking fridge, so that he can exit the club and go underground and apparently get out through what must be some tunnels or at least some kind of crawl space down there. But he's stopped when he sees the ghost of the indigenous woman we saw in Taniel's flashback, or memory, wearing a bear head. While that's happening, outside, Pennywise walks through the flames and asks a woman to take his hand so he can help her out. But, of course, he doesn't help her out. He bites into her face, and Ronnie sees this all happening, at which point she runs screaming into Halloran's arms, but Pennywise starts mocking Halloran as more dead walk by. The indigenous woman stands by Halloran's side, though, and he pleads for them to show him where the kids are. He then finds Hank, Ronnie, and Will, ushering them into the crawl space that leads them outside, but a collapsing wall separates him from Rich and Marge. The two of them now alone and trapped. Rich finds like a cooler box for them to hide in, but he knows it'll only hold one person, so he convinces Marge to get in, telling her that he's gonna squeeze in behind her, but of course he doesn't, because he knows he can't fit. So he seals her inside and sits on top of the cooler so that she won't inhale any smoke or burn, as he talks to her about knights and how they always protect fair maidens, and the two of them reveal that they love each other. Outside, the lynch mob starts fleeing in their cars, but Stan Kirsch, Ingrid's husband, can't leave because his car won't start. He pops the hood trying to fix it, and as he's doing this, Ingrid arrives in her full-blown clown regalia as Periwinkle. But he immediately recognizes that it's her and starts chastising her. It's at this point that Pennywise shows up behind him with a cleaver, cutting Stan's head in half horizontally and starts eating on the top half while staring at Ingrid. Somehow, she still sees her dad. She wants her daddy to tell her that she's done good because, as she explains, she orchestrated this whole event because she knew that it would, one, bring him out and allow him to absorb all the bad juju, the hatred and the fear and the chaos. So he tells her to show him her bow, which is what her father did earlier in the episode when she was a kid, when she first showed him that she had come up with her own clown costume. He then says, "Come to Papa." And as they embrace, he tells her that he's going to go to sleep now, but that he'll be back, because of course this is the end of the cycle. As he moves to leave, Ingrid desperately grabs his arm, begging not to be abandoned. So he turns, with blood dripping from his face, and she realizes at this point that this isn't her father after all. She backs away as Pennywise confesses that he actually ate her father, but that her father still lives inside him. And then he dislocates his jaw and opens his face and shows her the deadlights, and she begins to float upwards, to levitate. The next morning, with the black spot burned to the ground and the flames out, a firefighter rescues Marge from the freezer box. She looks around, and of course, there's Rich, dead, sitting there, never having left her side, and having apparently died from smoke inhalation. She briefly hugs this boy that she loves and cries with her head on his chest as Ronnie and Will walk in and also start to cry. Outside, Ingrid is being wheeled away on a stretcher, but she's still alive. Then the Hanlons show up and go straight to Will. Leroy, though, then goes into the woods to find a shaken Dick Halloran, who is just seeing dead people everywhere, including now people who just died in the fire. He tells Leroy that the entity is gone, that it went to sleep. But then he tells him and Colonel Fuller, who's also there, that he can now help them find one of the pillars for sure by following the ghost of the Native American war chief to her burial spot. Meanwhile, on the radio, the fire has made the news, and it's blamed on, of course, bad electric wiring at an illegal speakeasy, which of course isn't true. The report also says that Hank Grogan was found amongst the dead, which isn't true because Charlotte got his clothes from him when he was hiding in the woods after the fire and put them on a corpse at the scene to make everyone think that he was dead. Elsewhere, surrounded by others from the tribe, Rose tells them all that the cycle is complete and now it is sleeping, and that they have to focus on the lives that they saved and keeping it in its cage for the next 27 years. Over at the Halloran home, Charlotte is calling someone who can help her get Hank out of Derry, but when they won't answer, she decides to just go there herself. Will, meanwhile, wants to go with his friends to tell Lily what happened, but his mother refuses to let him leave. So Ronnie and Marge end up going to Lily's house. They find Lily sitting on her bed in the dark, clutching the dagger, and they tell her about Rich before going to clean up everything that he left at the standpipe, and it's all very emotional. They're all crying through all of this. General Shaw arrives at the new dig site to see Halloran, who still sees the woman in her bear headdress watching him. They quickly discover a huge double turtle shell with a remnant of the star inside. They take it out and put it in a box for transport, but Fuller tells Leroy they're going to take the pillar back to the base and try to analyze it to see if it will help them find the other pieces. Halloran doesn't like this plan, thinking that it's like leaving the cell door open. While all this is happening, Daniel is watching before he runs back to his Aunt Rose's house, where he finds Charlotte and Hank asking for help to sneak him across the Canadian border. Back at the Derry Air Force Base, the unearthed pillar is picked up by men in protective suits who feed it into a fire to incinerate it. But Leroy draws his gun, demanding that it be shut down. He doesn't want it destroyed, because he knows it's what's keeping it at bay. General Shaw, of course, appears and tells everyone to put their weapons down before asking to speak with Leroy, at which point he explains that the truth is this was never about Russia, and it was never about containing it. It was about finding a way to release it so that the fear that it instills in people would keep the public in line and from fracturing into a civil war situation, which he fears is otherwise in the offing. And not without good reason to think that, because it pretty much was. He continues with his plan, ordering the pillar to be destroyed, and so it is. As the episode ends, we see it back in the sewer, sitting in a cavernous pool of blood and guts and viscera, literally up to his eyeballs, about to go to sleep, only to become suddenly reinvigorated. Alone at the Halloran home back on the base, Will answers a ringing phone to hear Ronnie's voice, who says she can't get over Rich being gone. She says creepy things though, like, "I can smell him," her voice bleeding into Pennywise's, and Will of course realizes what's happening, telling Pennywise over the phone that he's done being scared, but when he turns around, he finds Pennywise right there in his house, and is soon himself shown Pennywise's deadlights and seemingly going into a hypnotic state. And that's where the episode ended. So I've been saying from the beginning that I really like the show and I think it's really, really good. And that remains the case. This episode was frankly fantastic. It's some of the best television I've seen in a long time. And I mean, Mr. Skarsgård is knocking it out of the park, both as Bob Gray and the evil entity in this episode. Just creepy and scary and gross, and on the other hand, charming and sympathetic as the actual Bob Gray. So just crazy acting on his part. The acting that these kids are doing in this whole series is fantastic. And this episode, they just turned it up to 11, especially the kid, playing Rich, and the young lady playing Marge, who, by the way, is 17 in real life, but still young and just so good in her part. Same for the young lady that plays Ronnie. And of course, Lily, who we really didn't see in this episode, but, Ronnie has gone through it in this show as much as the rest, if not more. And the actress playing her is just killing it. So, that's great. And just, the whole thing about the valiant young Rich sacrificing himself to save the girl that he loves. It's heartbreaking. It was heartbreaking, but heartwarming at the same time. I wish it had gone otherwise, because I said, towards the end of my review last week that I really didn't want to see Rich die, and that I was 50-50 on whether or not I cared about Marge dying. But, I'm glad she made it. It's fine that she's sticking around. I like her character more and more with each episode. I just wish they could have found a way to save Rich, but we know that Will has to live. They can't kill him. We suspect, or at least I do, that Ronnie's going to live and that she's going to father a child, at least one child with Will, who is in one of the It movies. So, they have to kill somebody. They can't all make it. It's not going to make sense, right? So they have now killed Richie, and they gave him a hero's death, which, if he had to go out, I'm glad they went with that. I remain hopeful, kind of, that they're not going to kill Lily. We shall see. Goodness gracious. So just a phenomenal episode. I don't see how they're going to top it in the finale, but I suspect that they're going to, or at least match it. So far, the very best episode of the season, which itself has been a great season, so that's saying something. And I'm praising this show to death week after week in the same window during which Stranger Things, which I didn't cover on the channel, released the first half of its final season, which, frankly, was not anywhere near as good as this season of It Welcome to Derry has been. And it's sad for me to say that, because Stranger Things Season 1 was an absolute masterpiece. It just sort of went downhill by degrees after that. And it's okay, it's good, but it's not great. So when I praise this show, you have to understand it's not because I just like everything, or that I just like everything, sci-fi or genre to, the same extent. I don't. If you've seen my reviews of Star Trek, recent Star Trek, you already know that. But I'm not just praising this show to praise it because it's okay or it's good. It's fantastic. And it sets itself apart from other shows in its fantasticness. It's just really, really, really good. It's creepy. It's, well acted. It's moving. It's just not only because of this, Rich and the kids dying, but because it's, focused partly on actual strife that this country went through in the 60s. And, it has something to say about that. And so that's also good. So it's just a fantastic show, and I'm really, really liking it. Now, that said, I did find some things in this episode to be a little odd. Like, for example, how did they destroy a piece of a star with just fire? And I know it was, kind of like in a special machine, like that's designed to be very, 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 very hot and to melt other materials, but a piece of a star? I wasn't sure I was buying that. I didn't do any Googling. I probably should have, but you can tell me in the comments if that makes sense to you, or if you know whether or not that would actually work, because you did Google it. But I find it hard to believe at first blush that you could just melt a piece of a star, in a regular fire, especially one that had been imbued with, spiritual power, in this case, by the natives, So that sort of didn't work for me. So I don't know. Another question I have is, how did it take Ingrid this long to realize that that wasn't really her dad? Like, she clearly knows what the entity does. She clearly knows that the entity feeds on, evil and fear psychically, and that it feeds literally on people. She's known this for 25 years, 27 years, but she still thought it was her dad doing that. She didn't realize that. I mean, I suppose she couldn't have conceptualized the fact that it was an evil creature from space that had merely taken the form of her dad, but like it eats people. Like, and it has the ability to feed off of, fear and so forth. So how do you not know it's not human and that it can't possibly actually be your dad? How do you not know that until the moment she realizes it in this episode? I thought that was a little messed up. Interestingly, it seems that her fate is going to be similar to what I had imagined her fate was going to be, or had hoped her fate might be, when I did my review of last week's episode because of the poetry in it. I think it's kind of poetic that she spent all these years basically doing things in order to feed the entity's abilities, in order to keep it around and to make it manifest so that she could see her dad. And ultimately, it led to her being deadlighted and attacked by the entity, which to me is poetic justice. So I did enjoy that aspect of her coming to realize that it wasn't actually her dad, and then what resulted from that being true, which was that he doesn't give a shit about her. And now he's going to continue to use her, but apparently more directly. It looks like he hypnotized her. Anyway, one other thing I didn't understand about this episode was the thing with Dick Halloran, where he's seeing all of these dead people, from the fire and from the past that maybe died in the area. And they're all kind of like converging on him and whispering at him because he's been acknowledging some of them, which he says, is what makes them sort of come at you. And this is because his box was opened, supposedly. But the box has not been explained to work quite this way in the books as I understand it. My understanding of what the book explains about the box is that it can be used to put particular ghosts inside, so the particular ghosts that you encounter don't bother you. For example, the ghosts that inhabit the hotel in The Shining. And so in the episode where his box is first opened, my understanding was that the ghosts he had kept in there would come out, and those would be the ones bothering him. Prior ghosts that he had already encountered that he had managed to put in the box. But if the box being opened did that, it also made him hyper receptive to seeing new ghosts wherever he happens to be, which I guess with the box closed didn't happen because his psychic ability only worked when he touched something, that had some kind of resonance, or he wanted his ability to look at somebody's mind or something. So I was a little confused by why the fact that his box was open meant that he could see all these new ghosts. I didn't know that that was part of that because it wasn't explained that way to me. But anyway, maybe that's what it is. Maybe his box being open just, not only lets out spirits that he'd previously locked away, but also just opens his mind like a giant satellite dish for ghosts and whatnot. But that's not the way that I understood the box to work based on, what my wife's telling me about what is in the books and reminding me about what was in, the various movies in the Stephen King universe. And they didn't really give any explanation for how it works in the show, like that was too specific. So I was just confused. But anyway, maybe they'll explain that a little more before the season ends, which of course now is a week away. So I'm going to get out of here, but I will of course be back to do a breakdown and review of the season finale once it's released. Until I return, I wish you peace and long life.